Now, the psychical sense of self is either going to be above or below actual reality. Either we're going to think of ourselves as more good looking or less good looking, a far better person or a far worse person, a person with many great traits or a person with very poor traits, and so on. So regardless of whether you have a good or bad self-image, it is always a false self-image. The psychology of perception. Hi. Today we're diving into the fascinating world of psychology, specifically exploring the intricate aspects of self-perception. I think it's fair to say that a great many people do not like themselves very much. There are also quite a significant amount of people whose perceptions of themselves, either good or bad perceptions, which vary widely from the reality of who they are. So we are trapped by our self-perception, and if so, what can we do about it? Self-perception, defined by the American Psychological Association, involves how we view our mental and physical attributes, essentially constituting our self. So we have to ask ourselves, how do you view yourself? What are your thoughts? What are your values, your beliefs? What images come to your mind when you think about yourself? Truly, who are you? So the thoughts you have about yourself, the images and feelings you have about yourself are all part of your self-perception at work. Self-perception has three major components that are shaping our understanding of ourselves. Firstly, there's self-image. It's how we perceive ourselves in real life, our actual image. Secondly, our self-esteem, the value we attach to ourselves. Do we perceive ourselves positively or negatively? The ideal self. This is the self that we aspire to, consisting of our desired values, beliefs, and talents. If we think about it, we aspire to be an ideal, and often this ideal is at odds with who we are in our daily reality, and yet our self-esteem is caught up in these perceptions of self. According to the French psychoanalyst Jacques Lacan, the young child goes through a stage of development labeled the mirror stage. And in this stage, the young child aspires to create an image of itself which is ultimately a false image, and that the child needs to create a sense of self. Even though it might be haphazard, half true, half false, it still needs to create some sense of self in order to have an identity. Because as human beings, we are sentient beings. We have self-conscious awareness. On a practical level, a physical mirror reflects back an image of ourselves which is in reverse. So right side is left and left is right, and so on. For most of us, we see pictures or video of ourselves. It's disconcerting. And why is this? It's disconcerting because we're seeing ourselves as others see us, and we're not used to that. We're used to seeing a mirror image instead. Every day in the mirror, we see a mirror image, not the actual image. We look at the left side and think it's the right, and so on. Now, when we think about this from a psychological perspective, we can take a step further, and we come to realize that it's not simply our mirror image and a physical mirror which is at odds with reality, but indeed, it is also our psychical sense of self which is at odds. Now, the psychical sense of self is either going to be above or below actual reality. Either we're going to think of ourselves as more good looking or less good looking, a far better person or a far worse person, a person with many great traits or a person with very poor traits, and so on. So regardless of whether you have a good or bad self-image, it is always a false self-image. Now, on top of this incremental or decremental view of oneself, we also have an ideal which is based upon arbitrary early life influences. A loved one says to someone in a room while we are sitting there as a small child that tall people are beautiful, and we take on this belief. Another time, a person whom we love and respect says that money is important, and we take this belief on as part of our ideal image, and so on. While these observations may have some truth in them, to some degree, the problem arises in human psychology whereby they become ideals, which we aspire to, and anyone who possesses these traits, whether it be ourselves or someone else, they are now immediately incremented or decremented in our own eyes. So our very sense of self, our own self-esteem is caught up in a world of mirrors and shadows. It is a subjective world, not an objective one. And we tend to persecute ourselves and others, of course. When we are not persecuting ourselves, we are looking through coloured glasses and seeing a form of reality which is definitely not true reality. We all know, of course, the famous phrase that looking through rose-coloured glasses or rose-coloured spectacles when you're in love, because when you're in love, everything looks amazing. We could then say that when you're depressed, you're looking through maybe black glasses. Everything looks bad. These are all perspectives. So our self-perception is either making us or breaking us. So what can we do about it? How can we live a happier life? And how can we have a self-perception which is more objective? And let's be frank about it, more useful to us in daily life. One thing which we can do is recognize that we are charting our self-perception via a bunch of arbitrary ideals and arbitrary self-perceptions, and that so long as we do so, we are holding ourselves back in the process. There is, however, one way to go beyond this limitation which forces us into either liking, or more often than not, disliking ourselves, and of course judging not only ourselves but others as well. And this is the realization that everything is subjective, that we have always had and always will have a subjective view of reality. We will never have a fully objective view of reality. And not just us, even those important people in our early life, our family, our friends, our neighbours, our classmates, our teachers, our bosses, our teammates, and so on, they are also subjective in how they see things. They are also living in their own room of mirrors, as it were. And the only way we can have peace of mind is to realize that we are more than we appear to be, and that we have to stop judging ourselves and others and start realizing that self-perception is always a subjective perception and not an objective perception. We can only prove anything objective when it directly impacts the world around us. For example, if a person robs us, then objectively we've lost money. If one car hits another, then objectively speaking, the first car has caused a car crash, and so on. So on this basic level, we can be objective through many aspects of our life. But there's so many aspects of our life which are not objective. They are subjective. Questions like, am I a nice person? What is the good life? Am I leading or living an ideal life? Should I be open to another person or worldview or not? All these are subjective perceptions, and as such we cannot deign our view inherently superior to the views of another simply because our belief does not chime with their belief. One thing is clear though, if we torture ourselves and have a negative self-image, it will truly hold us back. So the first and foremost, the most important thing in living a happy and constructive life is realizing that everybody is subjective, and not to be so quick to judge ourselves or others. There's also some other practical things which we can do along the way. So what we have to understand is obviously that there is a positive and a negative effect of self-perception. Individuals with positive self-perception focus on the present, are optimistic about the future, and accept both criticism and mistakes in a positive way. They celebrate their small wins, refrain from harsh self-criticism, and appreciate their unique journey without comparisons. If we look, however, at the person who has a lot of negative self-perceptions, conversely, those with negative self-perceptions dwell on the past, judge themselves harshly, and may struggle with building relationships. They often undermine their achievements, lack self-confidence, and engage in harmful self-talk. And of course, there are many consequences of negative perception, in that negative self-perception can lead to serious consequences such as eating disorders like anorexia nervosa and bulimia nervosa. It can also result in us being more inclined to be depressed. It can also result in, of course, in less likely to be able to stand up and maybe ask that person out for a date or to have a healthy relationship with a romantic partner if we have one. Also less inclined to look for a pay rise, less inclined to follow our passions, more inclined to be self-critical and critical of others, and basically unhappy. In other words, you cannot afford the luxury of negative perceptions. So how then to improve our self-perceptions? Here's a few things that you can do, apart from the earlier point that we made about seeing that things are subjective and moving away from judgmentalism. We can also do the following. Firstly, concentrate on your strengths. Shift the focus from the weaknesses to the strengths to build a positive mindset. Sure, you suck at certain things. Maybe you're not so strong, maybe not so good looking, maybe not so intelligent, but don't think too much about it. There's not much you can do about your height or how pretty you are, unless you go and get cosmetic surgery, and sometimes that doesn't work very well, or how intelligent you are. But look at what you're good at and focus more on what you're good at. And everybody's good at something. Secondly, exercise gratitude. Practice gratitude daily to recognize and appreciate positive aspects of yourself. So a lot of people have great difficulty with gratitude. And the problem that people are having is a thing we call victim consciousness. And victim consciousness is based on the idea that I'm not under my own power. I can't do anything with my life. I'm just being thrown around, and basically it's everybody else's fault I am the way I am. So what we have to do is begin by looking at our life and finding little things to be grateful for. And this will slowly but surely, as we build up a sense of gratitude, move us away from victim consciousness and start making us aware that we do have a certain amount of power in our life. Maybe not ultimate power, but a certain amount of power and freedom of movement in our life. So you might say it was very difficult to be grateful. An exercise I would recommend is before going to bed at night, look back at the day, no matter how bad or crazy the day was, and try and find 2 or 3 things to be grateful for, no matter how small. Say, for example, you're on the way to school or on the way to college or on the way to work and the bus breaks down. Instead of focusing upon my day is ruined because the bus broke down, focus upon that maybe another bus came in half an hour and picked us up. It could have been worse. Let's say, for example, you're in a small traffic accident. Instead of thinking my day is ruined or my life is ruined because I had a small accident that maybe broke my leg, maybe instead think, well, it could have been worse, I could have died. Let's say you lost money. Let's say somebody took you for a ride, you lost some money. Well, it could have been worse, it could have lost more money. I know this might sound silly and pedantic, but it's actually very effective. We've got to find ways of getting appreciation, even if it's false, even if it's made up, because when we appreciate, we shift our conscious awareness away from loss, away from lack, away from being a victim, to having a more upbeat viewpoint. And we can only achieve things in life through a more upbeat viewpoint. And I would definitely recommend trying to develop some gratitude every day. Find something to be grateful for. A very ideal time is at night going to bed, because at night time we're actually programming ourselves, and that carries over to how we feel when we wake up in the morning. And really the 2 most important times of the day, the first thing in the morning and last thing at night. So do try working on gratitude. Exercise self-compassion. Treat yourself kindly and focus on what you're doing right, practicing self-compassion. Getting back to what I was saying earlier about judging ourselves and this thing of that everything is subjective. One of the issues I see a lot in daily life is many people, they're continually judging themselves as bad and judging others as bad. And they have terribly high standards that nobody could possibly reach. Now, the problem with this is that there's a lack of self-compassion. A lot of people, because early in life they got a lot of criticism for one reason or another, and they developed a lot of negative self-talk, and they developed low opinions about themselves. They tend to have a polarized black and white view of things and see everything as this way or that way. And they can only be happy if things are this way and not that way. And there's always some reason to criticize themselves and criticize others, to be harsh upon themselves and harsh upon others. So again, self-compassion is a way forward. So think about it this way. First of all, we're realizing things are subjective. It takes away from that black and white thinking. We really got to move away from that black and white thinking and start thinking that things are so much more subjective. And I don't really have to judge myself so much or judge others so much. Try and be grateful, and then of course try and be compassionate to self. Because you're living in your head, and you're living in your heart, and you're living in your body, and you're living a life according to a paradigm or narrative that you're telling yourself. And it's so much better to be living in a compassionate world inside yourself than a than a world that's full of, harsh self-criticisms or criticisms of others. You might be right, but is it torturing you? That's the thing. You have to ultimately get along in life and find a way of coping with different situations. Develop a more optimistic attitude by acknowledging that you're worthy of caring for. So leading on from this idea of self-compassion is the idea of being more upbeat. So we can see the pattern here. First of all, accept a certain subjectivity. Then we have to look at being grateful and treating ourselves more nicely, and then realizing that there's possibilities. Because if things are not so objective, and if my viewpoint is not so objective, maybe it's more subjective, maybe there's also more possibilities. Maybe I've been holding myself back with my negative self-talk and negative viewpoint and things. And that's another point as well. We should reduce negative self-talk. And that's a whole video in itself. I've done videos on this in the past. But basically, we need to swap out our vocabulary. Another way I would look at it is like weeding the garden. We need to weed away those negative thoughts and self-criticism, which are helping us back. They might be objectively true, but we're torturing ourselves. It's like sarcasm turns to cynicism when there's too much of it about. It's okay to be sarcastic. It's okay to be right. But sometimes maybe we're torturing ourselves in the process. So to conclude, your self-perception is a powerful force that shapes your thoughts, your emotions, your behaviors, your understanding, and fostering a positive self-perception can lead to a happier and more fulfilling life. It's a slow process, and there's many aspects to this. But begin by realizing that you are creating a reality for yourself, and that you can actually deselect. That reality that you're living in now was probably largely created arbitrarily, especially early in life, by experiences. The beliefs you have, the views you have, are not necessarily 100% objective. And that if you don't like the way you think about yourself, and you don't like the way you feel about yourself, you don't like the way you think about others, you don't like the way you feel about others, you can actually choose to have a different and broader view of life, which might well be more rewarding, satisfying and helpful. One that makes you live a better and happier life, a more fulfilling life, a life where you can help others more. I hope you like this video. Please like and subscribe if you do, and I'll talk to you next time.